Okay, so I think we have to start. 2 words before I actually begin with I will show you this morning is a little bit my current state of research and many new ideas that I'm still having. So it's a little bit the process I will show you. One of the things I have to do in the framework of my project is to write a rather lengthy monograph, and of course I'm already working on that, and what I will show you now is some of the work I am doing with that goal in mind. So in a way I will show you, so to speak, my kitchen. I opened the kitchen so that you see how I'm preparing the food for in 2 years' time what will be out there. And today I focus a bit on this musical work again. I mentioned yesterday some of my views on this, and at the end of the presentation I will particularly introduce you these 3 new concepts are appropriated for music: multiplicity, axiety, and transduction. This is not any kind of baroque kind of complicating things. I think we need new words, new terminology. Music vocabulary is stuck for many decades now, I think. I just very recently edited a volume with very well-renowned authors. What really surprised me is the vocabulary they are all using a terminology that is here around since 100 years at least. And I think we are in it because new words, new terms also bring new ways of looking at things, of listening to things, new practices. And I urgently feel this need. So that's one of the reasons why I'm presenting you this. To start with some basic, and I will be very quick about this. If you look about ontological discussions about what is a musical work, we have several views, and of course this list would give enough stuff for a whole seminar of 1 year length or more. But in very short, mainly you have philosophers who had different views, idealistic views. There is the idea in the mind of the composer, and somehow it is translated into a strange object, a score, and then is performed. There are Platonist views, ideal types, Gerald Levison, Walter. So you see the kind of Platonistic views that are still very active. There are some essentialist views, and then the analytic theories, which come more closer to the practitioner. The nominalistic theories, Nelson Goodman, Gerald Levinson, where they start focusing on the score and on the performance, on the current instantiation of the work in the here and now. But still, these all are philosophers of music, or simply pure philosophers like Benedetto Croce or Sartre or Heidegger. And more recently, in the end of the 20th century, the question of historicity became more important, and then you have, of course, Lydia Gurr, who brought this topic to the core. So musical works should be seen in the particular specific historical moment they appear, they emerge, and what happens afterwards. And so musicologists took a little bit over the discourse about this. But very basically, we have these ontologists and musicologists. The ontologists, in the most radical positions, defend, of course, the absolute aesthetic autonomy of the work of music and of art in general. Musicologists more and more, and then new musicology did a lot on this direction, bring in the historicity. So to my mind, in all this debate so far, 2 things are missing. One is the practitioner, and we have very strong views about what musical works are, and I don't see in this list a practitioner. And also missing what I call materialist approaches. This will be clear what I mean by this materialist approach in a moment. So what I thought, and in my original intentions when I started the project, I had no intention of entering ontological discussions, but I think it became necessary, and what we can do is to very simply try to create or to define for our use a domain ontology. So not a transcendental ontology that will explain everything, but a domain very specific to, can you read? I can make it bigger. So very simple questions. What can be said to exist? What is a musical thing? Into what categories, if any, can we sort existing, in this case, musical things? So I'm talking about ontology in this simple sense, yeah? not transcendental senses. And so I will focus very much on things and practices. This means in immanent processes. Immanence is a very important word for my project, for our activities. So this appearance here and now of something, as we just experienced in the session before, total immanent process. And I will give the word to the practitioners, composers and performers. So some of you know already where I have arrived last year already. I showed you 1 year ago, more or less this. What I understand with the word things. Yeah, there is a whole history, if you want, in the discussion. It comes from George Kubler, History of Things. We can refer further to Heidegger, etc., but we don't need it now. I created this new kind of typology of things that we musicians deal with in our daily practice. What I call parastrata. Can you see? Yeah, you can see. Even like this, you can see. So everything that was there around the composer when the work appeared in its first visible form in time. So manuals, historical instruments, iconography, all this gives us information about those parastrata. Then the substrata, with that I mean sketches. You have here some examples. I don't know if it will pop up. Yeah, it pops up. Some Beethoven example. We deal with these things more and more. These sketches are now also increasingly more available on the web for free, most of them. And if they are not on the web, it's very easy to take a cheap flight to Warsaw or to Moscow or London and go to a library and see. It's much more accessible, all these things, than they were 50 years ago. Much more. First edition, so all these are substrata. So this means all those materials that the composer or the first performers used and that are available to us today in archives or libraries. But then you have epistrata. So once there was this first definition of the piece, starts its historical life, the afterlife. Yeah? And every piece has a life of its own, totally independent from the composer, from the first performers, from the first editors, and from the century it was produced. So these epistrata are all these editions throughout time, the analysis. So musicological works are part of the epistrata, philosophical reflections about a work, a composer, a piece, a bar belong to this. And then, of course, we have what I call metastrata, which is the goal of our activity. So we deal with the parastrata, with the substrata, with the epistrata, and we aim at producing something to appear here and now. Performances, expositions in the sense the research catalog uses the word, assemblages, recordings, transcriptions, comments, etc., etc. So these are the 4 basic strata. I'm working now on a 5th level, which I still don't have a name because I see it more as a rocket going out of the planet, which are the futures of the piece. As in the de Lazabelle, you could see the new commissions, I think, as in terms of, like in differential calculus, the derivate function. So you have the curve, but you have the tangent and the cosine, and they relate to the curve. So that's what I'm trying to do with the new compositions. So this will be next year. I'll show you something. So then with these things, the way I am defining, so this is my particular domain, ontology, and the categories inside this ontology. With these things, how do I work? Yeah, what do I do? And also some of you are familiar already with the methodology I am proposing, which is here very simply represented. So the archaeological moment, the history of these things, they are retrievable. Yeah, again, we can go to libraries, archives, etc. We find them, we identify them, and this is what I still call a traditional moment of research, and we share the methodologies of all the historical sciences, musicology, anthropology, sociology. They all give us very good methods to do this. Then there is the genealogical moment, because all things, I mean, one thing that happens here when I talk about things, and I put it there below the title, equalization flattening. So I'm saying all these strata, they're all equal. That's my first operation. I equalize all of them. So there is not any edition is not better than the other. That's my first gesture. Any recording is better than the other. any performance is better than the other. I lower everything. That's my first gesture. The second gesture that starts having the genealogy is that, yes, all peaks are equal, but some peaks are more equal than others. So what I'm looking for is singularities. Again, water, if you think of water, 70 degrees, 80 degrees, 90 degrees, it's getting hotter. Nothing substantial happens. 91 degrees, 98, 99, 100, evaporates. This is a singularity. This is a very particular moment for water. Same goes for 0 degrees. Yeah? So they are singularities. So they are those more equal peaks than the 98 and 96 and 95, etc. So I'm looking for those particular moments. This I can also show you also in the afternoon in the session with Michael in relation to the Nono project. I will show you a very specific example of a sketch that is clearly such a singularity like the 100 degrees in water. So I look for those things, and this means these are objects or things with an incredible immanent power. They have the capacity to bring something stronger than others. I look for those. This is my genealogical moment. Once I collected them, again, this is traditional research so far. But then I bring the experimentation in, the experimental attitude. Bring them into combinations that were unprecedented. And here I claim that the artistry becomes really crucial, becomes fundamental. I'm not saying others cannot do it, they can do it, but we can do it in a completely different way. It's not a question of better or worse, it's a question of our specificity, and we can enrich things with a completely new links between them, what I am calling not exactly assemblages, but assembling processes. More important than the object is the process, so more assembling than assemblage. But we come to something and there is a snapshot. There is a moment, there is a performance, or there is an article, or there is a book. These are snapshots where we cut and we show the here and now of what we have. And of course, that object immediately becomes a thing becomes an epistrata. Yeah? So the moment you produce a metastrata, 1 second after it became epistrata. And you can work with it again and again. So last year I showed you in this very hall the Rash 11 performance. Most of you were here. For those that were not, we can just go very quickly, show a little bit. Should go from the beginning probably. So you might remember, and it's those that were not here, it's easy to explain. So I'm playing Schumann Kreisleriana. At the same time, we are seeing projected texts written by Roland Barthes about Kreisleriana. Other texts by Roland Barthes in different essays about music and particularly about Schumann were pre-recorded, are being projected sonically. And at the beginning, and normally I play, my interpretation becomes one component in the whole thing. So interpretation, in this sense, is just one parameter. It's not the end goal of my activity. That would be too reduced, too small. It becomes one parameter. And for example, what we were just listening, I'm playing in extreme slow motion. So this means Roland Barthes' impact on this object in a way that in this particular moment I propose to give it to you in extreme slow motion, because that in that particular context I think it conveys one of the messages of Roland Barthes very strongly. And so of course this has to be seen in the full context of the performance. It was a 1-hour event, but just to give you an idea how these things, the way I understand them, start creating new connections. And again, it's not about understanding better Schumann. No. It's about creating something new with those materials. That's the point. Here, the second example, we brought film in. You can hardly see here. In any case, it's a snapshot of Andrei Tarkovsky, Nostalgia, where he was dealing with the figure of Kreisler, Hoffmann, who was very essential to Schumann, to Kreisleriana. So the references might go very far away, I think the interesting thing is to keep an objective relationship. So that's why for me it's also important methodologically not to completely give up the research moment. So I think with the same materials, if I go purely artistically, forgetting all the connections, I can bring even further away elements, objects into the picture. In this particular project, I don't want to do it. So I remain in those things that I can objectively, scientifically, scholarly prove there was a connection between those objects. Okay? So now we come to the three concepts. We are at the end. So I propose a new image of work, and my claim is that so far in all those lists I showed you at the beginning, the ontologists and musicologists, and most of the performers and music theoreticians, etc., they still have this Euclidean view of things. Yeah? There is a transcendental field. This is very Kantian. Yeah? There's a transcendental field. In this field you have some objects that you can axionometrically identify. So you have one point of view, you can see the whole thing, or you turn around, that's not so difficult, and the object has properties. Yeah? A1, A2, AB, etc. And we have all, probably, we all did the kind of analysis I depict below. We all did, I certainly did a lot of this kind of very strict music analysis, where we are concerned with what I call extensive properties. What is measurable in a given piece of music? Yeah. What falls into a given structure, into a given model of looking at things? So for me, this is very Euclidean kind of vision, and I am proposing, of course, a Riemannian view of things. A surface is a space in itself, said Gauss, and Riemann developed this enormously. I have also this beautiful quote by Spinoza, who said, substance exists in itself and conceptualizes itself from within itself. So there is no transcendental space, there is the pure immanence from the inside, be it of us, of the things I presented you, of any object. There is this fundamental from inside, there is a kind of embryological development in everything. And so we don't look any longer, in the first instance, to the extrinsic properties of a work, but to its intrinsic properties. To give you an example, the skin, yeah, we use this word, is superficial, someone is superficial. This is a bit pejorative, yeah? For me, the skin, this is actually Paul Valéry who said it, the skin is the deepest. Because you, biologically, if you think really, all the organs that we don't see, everything is working, is laboring very hard, and the last achievement is the skin. This is the end of a very complex process. This is the deepest level. Biologically, this is the point. And so how things appear, I don't think there is anything hidden beneath. So if you, I will not say names, but for example, Adorno, there's always this idea there's something hidden. I don't think there's anything hidden. It's on the surface is the deepest, but you have to give it such a power and such an intensity that we lost in the last 100 years, I suppose. So in a way, I'm using Riemannian concept of the curvature tensor. So Riemann, this is very quick. Riemann defined the space that, I mean, if you have a point and if you know the direction, this point will move and the speed, you define a space. So it's the vectorial understanding of things. Yeah? You don't need the external and then you put a point at the coordinates. You don't need coordinates anymore. You need just the speed and the curvature of that point, and you generate a thing. And to me, this was very illuminating. So the multiplicity is the torus there. So words become this multiplicity. Yeah? Now, this point, this, I'm just describing this curvature tensor, full of energy, you need the speed. This is, for me, very simple put. Imagine a performer, be it a pianist or violinist, in the here and now is playing this particular pitch, and you'll go to the next pitch. There we are. This is the curvature tensor. This is the moment where the energy is in this point. We'll move to the next, and to the next. And there is no transcendental thing that tells you how many seconds. It depends on the intensity, be it of the vibrato, of the bow, of the weight that the pianist put there. And every great performer actually are those, probably is one of the definitions, that instantly calibrates everything, that the next pitch is perfectly in the right moment, the right energy, the right intensity. So I focus on this here and now, and that's where hexaity comes in. Hexaity is a medieval word created actually by Boethius, but then Duns Scotus is the philosopher that really developed it a lot. And hex, so this thing, what makes something to be that thing? What makes it particular and recognizable and absolutely individual? Then in the 20th, this concept was lost. Leibniz mentions it en passant, and it was Gilbert Simondon, great French philosopher that unfortunately died, not died, but was forgotten and now is reappearing. He did the translation misunderstanding, and he thought about hexaité, bringing in the process, so not anymore what Duns has got in mind, what makes this thing to be what it is, but how it came to be what it is. Simondon brought this in. And Deleuze, Gilles Deleuze, took this and appropriating it, start using the word hexaity to refer to intensive modes of individuation. This intensive mode of individuation, for us, the way I am appropriating it is what I just described you before. Is this mode, every time you start performing or composing, because this is the same energy, it start individuating something. And it all depends on this particular moment, on this curvature tensor, the energy you are creating or not creating. Yeah? So it's very intensive mode, not extensive. It's the intensity of that here and now. And so we have, as it is clear now, I make this very strong distinction between extensive properties and intensive properties. Extensive properties have to do with constitutive parts. Intensive with variations of power, as I was describing before. The concepts of longitude and latitude are also helpful because this we can easily understand. Longitude on the planet Earth is a pure abstraction. 0 Greenwich meridian could be anywhere, 80 degrees west or west. But latitude is not abstract. If you go to the equator, it's very hot. If you go to the North Pole, it's very cold. It's not an abstraction, it's a fact. It is a variation of power. So I think it's now clear we spent too much time in music thinking and making, I think, with longitudinal concerns about extensive properties, and I claim we should strongly move to look for latitudinal processes, bring the intensity to new levels and to new ways of exploring and exploding it. So I'm claiming, of course, intense becomings of the materials. This might be understood sometimes as a bit radical or a bit brusque or a bit, but it's a way of also awaking these things. For me, it's very important in relation to this not to think anymore in terms of stability or instability. This we're also very, there are also a lot of, I remember many piano teachers who say, yeah, you start in a very stable moment, and then you create something, you get unstable, and you go to the dominant and subdominant, and it's very unstable, and then you stabilize again. Yeah, this is a very classical picture that many teachers convey to us. I think it's much more interesting the concept of metastability. Again, Simondon developed this concept. It's beyond this dichotomy. So these are processes, they are neither stable nor unstable. They are in the movement, and they have qualities of stability and qualities of instability always. There's no such a thing as a stability, complete or a full instability. So and this metastability allows for many different futures of the thing, many potentials. You can go in many directions. And coming now to the transduction, so it is now should be clear. My point of energy, my Riemannian curvature tensor, the hexaity, the here and now, the absolute radical here and now of this particular moment. What it's all about is the transduction, how you pass from this to the next and to the next. This becomes crucial. Transduction, again, Gilbert Simondon, is the transmission of an impulse of virtuality from one actualization to another.
So if you think the performer or the composer, again I repeat, is absolutely the same kind of energy. If he or she is writes a pitch, there is something became actual in this particular moment. A C for the clarinet was written. Yeah? Now, there is still a virtuality. What will be next? We are in a field that is real. It exists. There are many possibilities already there. One will be taken. That's the new actualization. The performer the same. If you start hammer clavier, bar 1, you know bar 2 will come. But you don't know the exact intensity because it depends on the bar 1, how you really started, how it really sounded, how the energy was conveyed. So we are dealing always in this passage from the virtual to the actual. And very important that virtual is real. The virtual, it is real. It is in the field of possibilities. Yeah? Just a footnote that I mentioned here, Jean Piaget, because actually he was, I think, the first to bring this word transduction. Jean Piaget, so interesting to know, he opposed this to the deductive and inductive modes. One thing is the deductive, again, it's very extensive. The inductive are more intensive, but there is induction. And Piaget said, no, mentally, there are other levels, it's transduction. It's not deductive, it's not inductive. And I think we, particularly performers, we have this all the time. The moment you start practicing, even not on stage, you start entering transductive processes. And you are immediately assessing a lot of parameters that are going on in your body, in your mind, in your ears, and regulating all these things. So, why I think this word, because I'm concluding now, this transduction is important because I struggle with the word executioner. I struggle with the word interpreter. We are in post-interpretation era, absolutely. And this idea of I would not call the performer transductor, that would be a bit too technological. But I think this, I also don't like the word performer, because actually there's a dimension then performance of, or being performative. You know, there's this idea of being the best, of being the number one or something like this, which is a bit dangerous. I very much like, and this something is not in the slideshow here, the word operator. This is a word introduced by Carmelo Bene, the famous Italian theater actor and theater regisseur, director, who said he is not an actor, he is an operator, because he is working with the materials, is changing the materials, is collapsing the materials, suppressing things, and I work a lot with these techniques of suppression, elimination, compression of things. So I like this word operator. Maybe I might change, but for the time being I am there, because this word includes all the things I described to you before. The transductive moment is very clearly there. The relevance of the excited, the absolute radical here and now, that allows us to see these works as multiplicities, as, I don't say infinite, but I say innumerable things, a conglomerate of innumerable things at our disposal. And with these ideas, I hope we can change or add something to these rather too autonomical views of the work of music. Thank you. There's no chair. I don't know if there are questions. Yes.
Thank you for the wonderful presentation. And it's very dense and lots of new information. So I have a comment and a question, and if it's stupid, I apologize. There's a very interesting tension for me between the interventionist aspect of what you're doing and the aesthetic aspect of what you're doing. Because on the one hand, what you're doing really is an interventionist project. You're intervening with the ontology of the musical work as it is understood in our society today. And yet, when you subject these existing works to your processes and you create, through problematization, the new assemblages, do you not also end up, in the end, simply with a new work? definitely with an altered aesthetic content, but still with an aesthetic content. If I think about the Elizabethan variations of Tuesday, certainly this performance is the result of thinking, of probing, of looking at all these different aspects of archaeology, genealogy, and problematization. But in the end, do the performers not simply interpret the new assemblage which you've created? To what extent is the final result of this process not back to where you started with an ontological thing or work of reason?
It's a very good question. Makes more than says. Yes, this is one of the paradoxes. I mean, we live in the world, so we cannot avoid the moment that you put something there that is recognized the way you just said it is. That's what I call the snapshot. So in that particular moment, that's what we have. I put these things on the web, immediately open, public, so everybody can see that and will receive it as a work. Yeah, it's unavoidable. The only thing I can do, and I do, to try to counter this, is that we never repeat the same thing. This is excluded in all my projects. So what you heard, the last evaluations 2, 3, we'll do it in 4 or 5 weeks again. It will be number 4, and there will be different things, transcriptions, different pieces, different sequence of events. So I try to counter it by this. That's why all our performances are what we do as a serial number. And for example, the Rash, we saw Rash 11, we now already have Rash 13, it was already done. But some of the Rash, for example, there was one Rash was a lecture, I just spoke, other was an article, another was performances, some of them. So I try also to have a multimodal system where, so not only is not the same thing, but the mode of appearance is different. So again, this multiplicity, I'm generating another multiplicity, and I try to keep it multiple. So there cannot be only one way. So the performance by no means should be seen as the result of this. Is one moment, one stage in a process, which ideally will be infinite, if we are Methuselah, yeah, and we will continue. But there will be a time, yeah, it's closed, and then it is possible even that people look back and try to replicate. Yeah, we see this historically. We have this tendency, but this I will not be here to control. So I don't know. But it's not a goal. It should not happen actually. So it's the serial, the modality, and the modularity also. Because inside we'll show this afternoon, some of our outputs they have inside of the output are modules, which are really completely different perspectives, illuminations of that object. So we are always trying to reinforce this idea of multiplicity. I understand we live in the world, the constraints are against us, so it will be perceived as you just said it. Yeah.
Paulo, again, thank you very much for the presentation. And I think the question I want to ask you relates back to the section of your lecture about multiplicity. When you were talking, I think, within individual strata, and saying, I think that, and forgive me if I'm now misremembering, but I think you said your first gesture was to treat the elements within an individual stratum as being, I don't think you said potentially, but being all equal.
Yes.
And you then said you went on to look for the particular singularities.
Right.
Illustrated that with water boiling. But could I take you back to the first gesture? In other words, why it is that you begin by treating the elements within the individual stratum as being all equal?
Because the first reply is because they have been treated as very unequal.
Yes.
So we were educated, it's my case, trained and educated. For example, there were particular editions I was supposed to buy.
Oh, I see.
There were particular sketches I was supposed to look at, others not. No. I did not know of the existence of many others. And if you look, for example, the Abeli variations, 30 years ago, only 6 or 7 people in the world had seen the sketches. And these were musicologists, and it's not the goal of this presentation, but they were from the rich north. They were North Americans, Germans, Austrian, British, etc. So there is a problem there. We have to start also breaking this. And this, what I try to bring is this democratization of the information. And Fortunately, the Beethoven House in Bonn is on the web, so people from Bangkok, from Chile, from you don't know, can access the same sketches as William Kinderman could 20 years ago. You know, and might be that someone from those latitudes or longitudes also comes up with brilliant ideas about those sketches. Yeah? So this is why I insist this is also a political dimension, of course. Yeah? This equalizing. All things are equal. And then let's use our brain and our feeling to, but not believe an editor, a publisher, a performer. Yeah? So this is the first reason.
Yeah, but not advocating.
And the second, and the second is more content-wise. Is that I think if once you, I mean, Skits and Forschung, which is a discipline in itself now. I did a lot. I am one of the proponents of this. I did it in the late 90s and 2000s. And my supervisor those days, Jörg Stenzel, always criticized me. He said, no, why are you looking at sketches? You have to look at the work at the end of... And now that I saw how many people look at sketches, I understand him. Many people look at sketches like tourists. They go to beautiful places like Vienna and Venice and Ferrara and all these archives are. You know, they have good time and they go through these pages without really engaging with what is there ex ante, here and now. What are these pictures, this drawing of the composer really telling us? And to my surprise, I discovered in the works I dealt with many sketches that were completely irrelevant so far until I saw them. And I re-evaluated them and said, this is the most important sketch. I saw in the afternoon one example of those. And that changed the view of a piece. You know, so I also think content-wise we need, and I myself, I should go again and look again to the same sketches because I probably will find new potentialities in it.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Oh, well, thank you. I'm just, this may be going beyond the scope of the project, but I'm just, the thing that keeps coming up in my head when you're talking about, you know, democratisation, political dimension, etc., is that all the stuff you've talked about and the works you've referred to, they're still very canonical. Yeah? They belong to a European canon.
Yes.
And I'm just curious about, you know, this model and whether it sort of, how far it goes, or potentially goes beyond these works that actually do have parastructure, substructure, structure, you know, because they do, because it's been collected over, you know, a couple hundred years in societies that see themselves as being apex, you know, culture. But, you know, where else would we go with this? Is there potential to apply this kind of model to circumstances where, you know, whatever we're dealing with is completely new, doesn't belong to those models? So
I'm sure there is much more potential. I'm sure, I take your point. I think it would be great. Again, constraints, you know. I was born in Europe. I was educated as a classical pianist, musicologist, publisher, you know. So I have my own constraints and I do what I can with those materials that I know best. But of course, I think if I do a good job, I can provide maybe a basis for someone to expand this to all the I'm dealing with completely Western notated art music. Even improvisation is not really part of my project, you know. I have to start with those things that I feel I am kind of expert. I know what it is about, I know the field, and I try to change this field. And by doing so, maybe this gesture can be of further use, which is a great thing. But
yes, there would certainly seem to be elements within the approach you're advocating that would sit very naturally with ways that ethnomusicologists have traditionally approached certain aspects of their work.
absolutely.
Does utility play a part in the construction of the system in which all of these concepts are situated? And I give a specific example as a subset. Riemannian space and Euclidean space. First of all, they're mutually transformative. They're not coextensive, but you can get from one to the other. Euclidean concepts can be expressed in Riemann terms.
Locally, Riemann local is Euclidean.
Yeah.
Locally.
And vice versa with constraints.
More constraints, yeah, but okay.
Right. But the choice of how you're going to operate and when you're going to transform from one into the other is utilitarian. So you don't use Riemannian geometry if you're playing billiards. But you don't use Euclidean geometry if you're designing a light speed or near light speed engine, right? You know, there are very specific properties of each of those that incline, that are married, let's say, to a domain of purposes or a domain of utilitarian operations.
Mm-hmm.
And what I'm missing, and what I'm just curious, this is not a critique, it's a question.
Mm-hmm.
I'm getting there, really. But when you construct an assemblage, or when you manifest the genealogy and the various strata in a performative way that gives us these things, there's a kind of utilitarian criterion that has to be applied, it seems to me. In one, and that, you say there's nothing hidden, but that is hidden at the moment because there's a kind of thicket of conceptual.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess I'm asking for a kind of openness about the utilitarian properties.
I never thought about that. I have many critiques about utilitarian.
Well, I'm not
using editions, etc. in the past. But do you mean also is this related to pragmatical decisions, or
a little bit? Yes. I mean, but it really has the sense. I guess I'm operating in the sense that you are living in this field, and I completely like it, love it. And I see you. I don't see you, but I can imagine
you see me.
I can imagine you moving between these domains and moving between.
Yeah.
But the movement itself, this transformative.
I think, if I understand, I think, as I also said in the methodology, there are moments of our research that are very traditional, very conventional, very Euclidean, if you want so. And we also take measurements. I mean, there is also this moment of doing that. Important is then to go beyond that, and to extrapolate, and to come, you know, as Riemann, from here to here. If you turn it around, you are instantly there. So try to create this, and that's a model that for artistic research I think suits very well, because you find paths that you could not think before. Again, it's the question, we don't know if there is an answer, you know, again, this kind of thing. So, and suddenly you discover there was an answer. Did not know. So, but okay, I will think further about this. They are making signs that I have to stop. Last minute question?
I just wanted to answer from a different angle.
Okay, go ahead. You are a team member, you are entitled.
Just to say that the utilitarian approach assumes a some form of goal that is defined, to which something is useful. And part of the project is that those goals are to be created in the process as well. So you can anticipate for what it might be useful, but once it's done, you can reconstruct how it may have been useful to arrive at this point. The question is, how can you suspend those set goals? And part of the procedures is to devise ways by which you would not be preconditioned within those positions what something is supposed to be. And that is actually quite difficult. So what perhaps things might be produced. But retrofitting into utility is always possible. I mean, that's part of the earlier question as well, that you cannot escape a reinscription of this. But you have to suspend it, otherwise you would not be able to imagine a different future for something.
Yeah.
So thanks to Paulo for this unbelievably rich presentation. We now take a break of half an hour. So we gather again 11:20 in the entrance hall. We'll have a little delay on the schedule, but we will miss Lucia's presentation because unfortunately she is ill and will not be able to give her presentation. So we will gather 11:20 in the hall, and then together we will go up to the top floor.